All right, so this is my last slide here before we do some example problems. I basically just want to revisit the circuit transformation that we saw at the beginning. Of course, we saw that you could map this circuit over to the S domain, so let's go ahead and do that. This would just be Vs of S. Of course, this would be IL of S. And now we would map our inductor. We know that it's going to be SL, and we can either map it with a current source in parallel, or we can map it with a voltage source in series, and both are valid. Both are valid models for the inductor. But if our initial condition is 0, then of course we can just draw it as an inductor, and we don't need to include those sources for the initial conditions. And so if we were going to map this over to the S domain, this would just remain R1. This would just remain R2. Let's just imagine there are no initial conditions in this circuit. And so then this would just be 1 over SC. And that's exactly how we would map this into the S domain. Okay? And so if we needed to add initial conditions, of course, we can choose whichever model we think makes more sense to us. We could always add the current source in parallel with our capacitor, or we could add the voltage source in series, and you can always refer back to these circuit models. It gets easier and easier the more exposure that you get and the more that you do these types of problems to just remember what you need to do, but you can always reference the material, of course. Okay, so I think that's it for circuit transformation. I just wanted to show how we can transform the circuit. It's really similar to doing what we did in the phasor domain, but of course there's a lot more context to understand what's happening here, especially when there's no initial conditions. It's easy to see that this looks very similar to what we did in the phasor domain, with the exception of now instead of j omega L, it's SL, and instead of 1 over j omega C, it's SC. And so everything is in terms of S now when we're in the S domain. And so let's go ahead and solve a couple example problems like this, and then we will be completely finished. So I'll end this video and we'll see you guys for the first example problem.